Hello, my name is Magdalena Trinda. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Rzeszów, Poland. My presentation is about the correlation between personality and gender in second language acquisition. In his book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, John Gray indicates that males and females are divided by fundamental psychological differences, which lay at the root of the vast majority of dysfunctional relationships. This fundamental gender difference has provoked a wide variety of scientific interest as to how the perceived differences between males and females might be defined and attributed. In the world of second language acquisition, henceforth SLA, the question of the role of gender in the success of the acquisition process is somewhat neglected. I intend to present a narrow part of a much broader doctoral research program into the question of whether it is at all possible to ascertain a relationship between gender and language acquisition. Here, the fundamental question posed is based on the question of personality and how personality might be related to gender, with the explicit intention of attempting to see if it is possible to isolate gender as an individual factor in SLA, or whether gender in and of itself will determine other factors which do have a clear influence on the language learning process. First, a brief overview of the existing state of research into the influence of personality and gender on SLA will be set out. Before turning our attention to the current case study, here the research methodology will be first outlined before a presentation of the results and discussion of the implications and conclusions to be drawn. For a full discussion of the state of theoretical research into the areas of personality, gender, and SLA, please refer to the accompanying paper, but for now it is sufficient to say that the research to date indicates that, from the point of view of SLA, there is clear evidence that personality has some influence on the success of second language acquisition, but is unclear exactly to what extent this influence occurs and what exactly is being measured. Equally, gender is likely to play some part, especially when one takes into consideration the current line of thinking that gender is a purely social construct and that a female's behavior is largely dictated by the imposition of social norms. But again, this refers more to communication strategies than actual language acquisition and does not leave us with a clear picture as to how far gender actually plays a role in language acquisition. What is interesting is the basic question: to what extent the gender of language learners and their personality go hand in hand. Furthermore, if there is no clear link between gender and personality, then is it at all possible to isolate these two factors in order to examine their influence independently? In my presentation, I shall attempt to answer the first of these two questions. In this section, following a brief introduction of the subjects of the case study, the method of data collection, and the survey used in order to ascertain the personality types of the participants will be discussed. For a full description of the subject, please refer to the accompanying paper. For the purposes of this presentation, it is sufficient to say that the investigation was conducted on a sample group of 42 participants between the ages of 17 and 35, with the majority being between 18 and 21. There were 17 males and 25 females, and their level ranged between B2 and C1 on the Common European Framework. Some of the participants were in a private language school, learning English as a foreign language, while the remainder were in the first year of their bachelor's degree studies in English philology. The personality questionnaire chosen was the 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire developed by Richard Stevenson, 2013. This was chosen because of its statistically proven reliability, having been tested on over 12,000 subjects, with the test results matching favorably with other assessment tools. It was also easily available to use and also readable and relatively uncomplicated for the students to comprehend. The test itself contains 77 forced questions, meaning that the respondents have to give an answer A or B. The questions are designed in order to identify 4 bipolar psychological preferences based on the original work of Carl Jung. These pairs are as follows: extrovert, introvert, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, and judging, perception. The combination of these 4 preferences gives a possible 16 personality types. As a result of the need for concision, a full discussion of the test will be omitted from the following, and we shall focus here on just the first of the pairs, namely the polarity of introversion-extroversion. The reason for this decision is based on the theoretical discussion which preceded this section, in which it was highlighted the fact that researchers into personality have tended to focus on the influences of introversion and extroversion. Having chosen the questionnaire to be used, it was then prepared in a PowerPoint presentation, with the respondents using an audience response system in order to register their answers to each individual question. The main reasoning behind this was in order to maintain a sense of normality about the questionnaire. The audience response system had been used from the beginning of the academic year in order to collect the mass of data to be used in monitoring the progress of the participants in reading and listening tests. Thus, the system was familiar to the learners. In addition, it was felt that by using the audience response system, it would be possible to reduce the possibility of collusion amongst the subjects. As each participant has their own unique response card, it was felt that there would be a much lower instance of people prompting each other. Equally, as the questionnaire was conducted in lockstep, there was no chance of early finishers putting pressure on those who took a longer time to complete their answers quickly in order to allow the lesson to progress. Finally, in order to maintain the veracity of the test, it was not announced to the students the real intention of the questionnaire. Rather, it was interwoven into a general lesson on the subject of personality. This was done in order to try to reduce the instance of respondents giving answers to the questions which they felt were what the researcher was looking for. The results generated were tabulated and will be discussed below. The first thing that becomes obvious is that the sample group is more or less evenly split on the whole, as shown in the following table. This is extremely encouraging as it comes within an acceptable margin of error for the standard population as calculated by Myers-Briggs organization, which said that there is a ratio of 49.3 to 50.7 being slightly in favor of introversion. When it comes to a breakdown along gender lines, we are presented with the following 2 sets of results. What is immediately obvious here is that there is a distinctive gender difference. The male ratio is almost 3:2 in favor of introversion, while the female ratio is 3:2 in the opposite direction. The first thing that is necessary to do here is to compare with the findings of Myers-Briggs. In males, the ratio is 45.9 to 54.1 in favor of introversion, while the female score is 52.5 to 47.5 in favor of extroversion. Therefore, the general bias is reflected in the results of the current study, although the extent of that bias, with females showing a greater tendency to extroversion and males the opposite being somewhat more exaggerated than in the benchmark population sample. The first and most obvious thing that seems to be suggested by the results obtained is that males have a greater inclination to introversion and females to extroversion, which runs contrary to many of the assumptions put forward in the scientific literature to date. So, returning to the neuroscientific work of Eysenck, on the assumption that extroverts have an enhanced short-term memory function, while introverts retain things in the long term, these results might go some way to explaining the academic results of males and females obtained in the A-level examinations in the United Kingdom. What would be very interesting would be to analyze the age of results of personality tests against the development of gender equality, in order to analyze to what extent the change of the social cultural position of females has influenced the perceived level of openness. With the theoretical assumption about the achievement of males in more academic situations, the logical extension is that females should, on the basis of the results, be the greater communicators, as they are the more open to social interaction. Consequently, they should benefit more from the social aspects of using language as a tool, and on the basis of the input model of Krashen, be the better users of language with the greater level of communicative competence because of the greater levels of interaction. There are a number of things which need to be stated at this point to mitigate any radical conclusions being drawn. The most obvious of these being the fact that this is a tiny sample group, with a slight imbalance in favor of the females. Secondly, this is not a sample which covers the entire population spectrum. It is a group which is in the main deliberately homogeneous, so it fails to take into consideration any potential changes of personality with age. Equally, the group is highly educated, with all members either being actively involved in or preparing for academic life. There are quite possibly other reservations which may be expressed pertaining to the results revealed here, but the limitation of space also limit our scope for speculation. What can be concluded here is that the results are sufficiently enticing to encourage further study on a much greater scale. It would be most interesting to test to what extent the results achieved here are anomalous. In addition, the next step would be to analyze the progress made in language acquisition during the academic year of the sample population to investigate any correlation between achievement and personality gender. But that is for another paper, and one can only at this moment speculate that one would expect the introverted male population to obtain a higher average grade than the extroverted female population in the fields of listening and reading. Thank you very much for watching.